and I have the privilege of welcoming Cox Communications Asian American and Pacific Islander ERG, as well as my NAMIC Atlanta members, to what will be a dynamic and engaging conversation today, all around breaking barriers. Now, for those who aren't aware, NAMIC stands for the National Association of Multi-Ethnicity in Communication. And we're all about engaging members in meaningful ways, really around networking, mentorship, and sponsorship, as well as trainings that take place within our organization as well. But with that in mind, I want us to take an opportunity to reach out to the Lotus leaders and recognize the fact that this is a great partnership in the making. And I want us to sort of enjoy the event that we're going to have today, because what people may not recognize is that this is Asian American and Pacific Islander Month. And so we're recognizing not just the, it's sad to say we recognize monthly achievements that people have, but I do want to take an opportunity to recognize the leaders who have helped organize this great panel today, and what also will be a month full of activities for Cox employees. And so with that in mind, our Lotus ERG leadership from an executive sponsor standpoint is Sujata Gasalia, as well as Grace Hong. The advisors are RK Gopinath, as well as Tammy Meener. And when we look at the glue, the individuals who do that work, from a organizational standpoint, our chair is Jane Lee, as well as Ryan Pooney. And the operational co-leads, Sandy Ha and Sophie Yan. And to all the other committee leads, we want to say thank you. Now, we can't say leadership in Cox without recognizing Pat Esser, our president and CEO. And so we know that Pat is traveling today, but his sponsorship and his willingness to want to take part in the activities that happens around our company is so ingrained in him that he carved out a moment of time to be able to come in and be our special guest and deliver a message to you guys. So Pat, if you're there, take it away.
Charles, thank you. Hopefully you can hear me. Can you hear me okay, Charles?
I hope so. It's low, but we can hear you.
Can you hear it? I'm sorry. I don't know if I can turn it up any more than I am. Let me first say this. Is it you got it?
Yep, you're good.
So thank you, Charles. And thank you for holding this event today. And I probably should be thankful also for leaders like Sujata and Grace and Riju, who are going to spend time with us today, really being transparent and open and giving us opportunities to learn. So thank you to the three of you. Bear with me a little bit. I am in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm here today because of our recent announcement of the acquisition of Segra. And I'm up here with a leadership team. So my connection to the world is my iPhone. So I'm putting technology to the test today. I share that with you that I'm in Charlotte for a very simple reason. And I want to make sure you know that your company is growing. We spend a lot of time talking about defending and expanding our core, but we're spending just as much time in adjacent spaces and new businesses. So we have growth opportunities, and those opportunities provide opportunities for you. And that's why you should care about that. Do want to take a moment and give a shout out to Lotus ERG. You know, our ERGs serve many benefits to our company, but the one which the Lotus ERG model has really done so well, and that is to get our employees' voices heard and get them heard more often. In our company, I think we want to make sure every voice is heard, and leaders like myself, we have plenty to learn. And Charles, thank you to you and NAMIC Atlanta for partnering in making this event happen. You know, I look at the world around us, and some days but better words than it's difficult and stressful to figure out what's going on and make sense of it all. So days like today, creating listening sessions is really important work. I'm also thankful to the number of Asian American employees at Cox who've been willing to spend time with me one-on-one to help me better understand what we're all going through, because it's those moments that those sharings, as personal as they are, help me become a better leader. So thank you. And I think you all know who I'm talking about. I do encourage you to keep checking in with each other. I encourage you to take care of yourself, use the wide range of programs that we make available to you. This ERG is an excellent example of that. And make sure you pay attention to our benefits and wellness programs that are also out there to help you through moments where I talked about stress and difficult times we have on a daily basis, we got to figure out how to get through. So let me do this. Let me wrap up here. Sujata, thank you very, very much. Grace, thank you very much. And Riju, thank you for being here today and spending time with us. Our company values inclusion. Our company values diversity, and we value equity, and we're not going to waver from that. And moments like that help bring that to life. So I hope you have a great session today. Thank you for letting me interrupt. I appreciate that. And Charles, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Pat, we thank you. It's never an interruption when you're joining with us. So, you know, as Pat mentioned, we have a great lineup of leaders, and when you have a great lineup of leaders, you need a great moderator. And so I have the privilege of introducing Larry Hoffer, who is the VP of People Services for Cox Communications Southwest region. Now, Larry's leadership and strategic direction in human resources space has aided us, when I say us, Cox, in the development of over 4,800 employees in Arizona and Nevada. And for his efforts, Cox received best places to work recognition in these states. Now, I would love to be able to say we are attributing his leadership and skills and talents to the fact that he was part of the NAMIC Executive Leadership Development Program, and then say, yeah, he has some Harvard Business School background and a few certifications in human resources from a lot of national programs. But you know, to be serious, just as important with Larry's work that he does for Cox is the fact that Larry's involvement in several nonprofits is also aiding in developing the community. Larry's been involved in Habitat for Humanity, the American Red Cross, the Asian Business Association, Neighborhood House, as well as YMCA. And so with all of those you know, attributes to his character, Larry is uniquely qualified in helping us have this conversation with our senior and executive leaders today. And I just wish you well, Larry. Take it away.
Thank you, Charles. First of all, sound check and video check. Can you guys hear me okay?
You're good.
Excellent, excellent. All right, so glad to be here. Actually, so let me share a quick story how I ended up being the moderator. So I received a call from Ryan Pooney, one of the Lotus coach here a couple of months ago, asked if I would be interested in hosting today's event. And I said, absolutely. And then Ryan proceeded to say, well, I got to be honest with you, you were not Lotus's first choice. I was like, wow. Actually, Lotus was trying to get Henry Golding, according to Ryan, to host to this year's event, but Henry was not available. He was out of the country. For those of you who don't know who Henry Golding is, he is the actor who starred in the movie Crazy Rich Asians. But Ryan was quick to say, you know, you and Henry has a lot in common. So you were a close second as our moderator. And I was like, wow, really? That Henry and I are very much alike? I don't really think so, because Henry is tall, he is handsome, and he is rich, and I'm none of those things. I think the only thing that Henry and I have in common are two Asian guys with Caucasian last names. But nevertheless, I will tell you that I am thrilled to be here, even though I was a second choice. So let's get back on track. Did you know that the members of the Lotus ERG are from 48 different countries? Amazing, 48 different countries. The point is, even in a supposedly homogenous ERG like Lotus, we are a very, very diverse group with very different ideas and cultural filters. Nevertheless, it is the vision of this Lotus ERG to enhance the employees' understanding, the value, the inclusion of a diverse AAPI community by offering development opportunities to its members, as well as advancing Cox business. Today's theme is on breaking barriers, and it's based on the book Breaking the Bamboo Ceiling by Jane Hume. Now, according to Jane, Jane explains that the lack of Asian Americans in executive position is brought about by a combination of a couple of things: Asian culture, our own upbringing, as well as the traditional stereotype casting of Asian Americans in the workplace. Our conversation today, hopefully with senior executives within and outside of Cox, is a proof that we are breaking those barriers and ceilings and paving the way for other Asian Americans to excel in corporate America. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to introduce our amazing panelists before we jump into some discussions with them. So let me go ahead and introduce the three guests speakers that we have today. So first of all, I'm going to start by introducing Sujata Gasarlia, who is our Executive Vice President and Chief Strategy Officer for Cox Communications. Sujata oversees strategy and business development, new business development. She is responsible for strategic business planning, competitive assessments, marketplace evaluations, and new growth opportunity. Sujata was born and raised in Lexington, Kentucky, and graduated from the University of Pennsylvania with a degree in economics and another in international studies. She also holds a master's degree in politics of the world economy from the London School of Economics. Sujata, thank you for joining us. The second person that I will introduce is Grace Huang, who leads Manheim, the nation's largest wholesale vehicle marketplace. With her leadership, Manheim enables clients to conduct business anywhere, anytime by connecting them with the largest network of digital and physical platforms and end-to-end solutions. Grace earned her MBA from Wharton School of Business at University of Pennsylvania and a business degree from UNC at Chapel Hill. And lastly, we have an external guest. Her name is Riju Bashish. She's the Chief Transportation Officer for Genpact, a global professional services company with presence in over 30 countries. Riju is responsible for driving strategic development and delivery of integrated transformation, digital and analytic solutions for clients in all industries. Riju is a certified Six Sigma Green Belt, has a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering and an MBA. So just again, wanted to welcome all of our distinguished panelists and thank you so much for joining us. So let's go ahead and get started. So today's theme, which is the theme for this month's AAPI Heritage, is empowerment to breaking barriers. So let me start with you, Sujata, if I may. Can you tell me about a time when you were empowered to break barriers? Specifically, who or what empowered you, and how important was it to you to being who you are today?
Thanks, Larry. And I think I speak for everybody on the call, which is that Henry Golding is a far distant second to you in all of our hearts. It's really good to see you, and I'm longing for the day that we can see each other in person again. And ladies, Richu and Grace, it's truly an honor to be on this panel with you. Your question is a great one. I am a firm believer that no one gets to where they are on their own, and I am absolutely no exception to that. I'm actually going to start early in life. So I, as you mentioned, I'm born and raised in Kentucky, and as a non-Christian kid of Indian immigrants, it is safe to say that there are many days in my childhood that I felt like a total outsider. But I had some teachers. I had a fourth grade math teacher named Mr. Lytell, who really helped me to see my strengths and to gain confidence. And to this day, I think that just to feel confident, to feel good about yourself, and to feel that you're worthy when you feel like an outsider sometimes feels like an act of defiance. It's probably the most important empowerment lesson that I've ever been given. To even now, for me, there are definitely times, a lot of times, where I am the only or one of few Asian women or women of color in the rooms I'm in. And so there are times that I do feel like an outsider still, and I have to make an active decision that I am worthy and I have something of worth to contribute in conversation. And so that's really something that I carry with me, even now. But there are a lot of other examples. When I was at Oliver Wyman Management Consultancy, I had mentors, mainly white men actually, who nudged me to take on more and more responsibility for bigger and bigger projects, and actually pushed me to become a partner. Because when I was at the firm, there were about 500 partners globally, 13 women, and I was the only woman of color. Thankfully that has changed since then, but to be able to project myself into a role where no one looked like me, like, I'm really grateful I had somebody who helped me with that and helped to see that in me when I couldn't see it. I've had the privilege of working for 2 women CEOs in previous executive roles. So, that's been just wonderful to see them work up close and to know it can be done, that you don't have to lose who you are and what you care about and what you value to lead and lead well. They've been outstanding role models for me as I have taken on more senior roles. And then Pat at Cox, Pat and other senior leaders create an environment where we have the space to take risk. My job in strategy and new growth is really about breaking barriers. It's about finding new avenues of growth. It's about thinking about new ways for us to push boundaries of what our company can be. And I really do feel empowered to take those risks and to think beyond what is today. But, one of the things, just Larry, in your question was that, the presumption that somebody empowers you to break barriers. And I just wanted to say that's most often true. But there are definitely times where those barriers are there to protect the status quo. And I think we've all experienced that. And, the discomfort, the risk taking, the courage to sort of stand up and say that you want to break that barrier, there may not be somebody there who's empowering you. And maybe with my last point, I'll just say sometimes I think that catalyst has to be you.
I love that. Thank you so much, Sujata. I wrote down several things that I just wanted to kind of put out as takeaways. You talked about oftentimes you're the only. When I talk to a lot of my I should say Caucasian friends, many of them talk about how they were the first to go to college, the first to whatever, and that's great. But imagine if you're a person of color or woman, you're the only. Not only are you first, the only. And I love the fact that you're saying sometimes you have to tell yourself, you have to give yourself those positive self-talks about, I am worthy, I can contribute. And by the way, there's nobody there to empower me to break the barriers. I have to be the one to do that. So thank you so much for that. And then the last point was about having mentors. And you talked about both mentors that look like you as well as mentors that don't look like you. And it's important because candidly speaking, if you're the only or one of the few, you're going to have to look at other mentors that don't look like you. And that's not a bad thing. That's actually a good thing because a lot of white males can be our allyship, and they have done this a lot longer than we have. So I would encourage all of us to seek mentors outside of people who look like us. So thank you so much, Sujata, very much. Great. So next question I have is for Riju. Is Riju on? I just want to make sure that I know. Oh, great. So I don't see her yet, but I'm going to assume that she is on. Ah, there you are. Thank you so much. I've been stalling to make sure that you were able to get on. So before I ask you the question, Riju, you're from Genpact. We don't know a lot about Genpact, so we'd love to hear a little bit more about for example, I heard rumors that Genpact is headquarters in Bermuda. Now, Cox's headquarters is in Atlanta. Personally, I would visit our Cox headquarters a lot more if it was based in Bermuda. So tell us a little bit about Genpact and your role there, please.
First of all, my apologies. I was in a board meeting and I'm a little bit late in joining. Secondly, it's my pleasure to be here and thank you for having me here and thank you for inviting me to this panel. It's an honor to be here. A little bit about Genpact. So we are a professional services company, about 95,000 strong. We operate out of 30 countries. So it's Bermuda plus 29, in case it catches your fancy to visit the other 29. Our mission in life is to transform companies and transform our partners in a way that is sustainable, that drives differentiated experience to their customers, and in both internal and external. And our purpose is to have a relentless pursuit to a world, to make the world a better place. And we collectively strive to get there. a little bit about our history. We were born as a captive of General Electric Company way back in 1998. And since then, we've transformed ourselves almost like a caterpillar multiple times and learned new skills along the way. But it's my absolute pleasure to be here, and we're honored to be a service provider to Cox.
Thank you so much, Riju. So here's my question for you. If you had a chance to go back in time to your younger self, what advice would you give yourself about what to focus on early in your career?
It's a fantastic question. And, when you're younger, and I'm an engineer by background, so you pride yourself on objectivity, you pride yourself on logic, you pride yourself on math, on science, all of that is good stuff. I mean, the fact that you become an engineer because you're kind of good at all of that. But as you begin to work, as you begin to go to college, it strikes you that relationships are super important. The art of life is as important as the science of life. And as you grow in your career, you understand how your indexation to people, to relationships keeps on increasing and the dial goes up. And in younger days, you're completely torn as to why it is important. And my advice to my younger self would be to absorb it and learn faster than what I probably did at that point in time. The second thing that I would sort of go back and say is life is all about learning. When you're younger, you finish college, you think you know it all. And for a few years, you think that, oh, you know better than most others around. As you look back, I mean, all of your growth comes from continuing to learn, continuing to imbibe new skills. And fast forward 20 years, actually, all of what we know today, we didn't even know 5 years ago. So those would be my sort of reflections.
No, those are excellent. Excellent. I love that you talked about the art of life is as important as the art of science. If I think about the stereotyping of Asians, right? We're supposed to be very good in the hard stuff, right? Science and math. Just so that all of you know, I'm going to bare my soul. The reason why I'm in HR is because I'm terrible at math, right? But think about it, but I'm good at relationship, right? So I'm good at relationship. So, but that's the thing. We focus on the hard stuff. And then when you get into any sort of business or corporate America, it's not always what you know, but how you interact with people. I had a mentor who used to say to me, Larry, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now, no one's going to remember what you did or the goals that you achieved. But what people will remember is how you made them feel. They're not going to remember what you did, but they're going to remember how you made them feel, right? It's all about relationship. And then the lifelong learning, absolutely. It's amazing that how technology has just kind of continued to grow leap and bound. And just a few minutes ago, I didn't even know how to add the background to where I have today. And thank you for Nicole for helping me. So great feedback there. And great advice. Thank you so much, Riju. So my next question is for Grace. Grace, you're the president of Manheim, the world's largest wholesale vehicle marketplace, which is amazing for a woman and a person of color to lead in a male-dominated industry. So my question for you is, what obstacles did you have to overcome in your career journey in the auto industry?
Well, Larry, first of all, it was a bit of a serendipity that I ended up in the auto industry. But I'm very, very glad I'm here. I'm actually calling in from Manheim, North Carolina, based in Kenly, North Carolina. Look it up. It's out in the middle of nowhere. But I absolutely love it. You said it earlier. I think many of us as Asians face the same stereotypes. And while many people will say these stereotypes are good, they also have a negative side, right? Wow, she's really smart, good at math, which I'm actually not. I barely got the calculus. That's why I switched to business. Math was a lot easier than engineering. But the downside is she's quiet, she's timid, she's shy. Can she really lead a large group? Well, Mannheim has 15,000 people today. So yes, Asians can absolutely do all of the above and some more. So I'm very, very thankful for today's panel because we have broken barriers. And, you know, part of it is, as Sujata said, it wasn't by myself. I did get very lucky as well, because I've met some amazing mentors along the way at Cox. And one of them is Janet Barnard, who many of you know. She took a bet. She basically said, no, I absolutely believe she can lead 15,000 people. And she really, really sponsored me. And so you have to have the smarts, absolutely. You have to have done all the hard work, absolutely. But also, you also have to form the relationships, as Sujata said. You know, it's, I am an anomaly. There has been several females, right, in the auto industry. So as an industry as a whole, as the auction industry, we've had several female presidents for our industry group. So that's not that uncommon. So in that regard, they respect me, right? Clearly I got here, it's Mannheim, it's the largest, I didn't get here by accident. But that doesn't mean I'm included. They respect me, I help make, you know, big decisions, I help shape some of the industry direction, but that doesn't mean I'm included in the back channel. I'm not included in the club because it is still very, very white male. And so all you can do is be aware that that's the situation and don't let that distract you. You have to, I hate to say this, you kind of have to put blinders on and keep going some days. Because if you let the negativity, if you wonder too much about it, it takes you away from the focus, which is come in and do a great job for your clients and for your team members. And so if I keep that focus, doing a great job for our clients and our team members, then everything around is noise. That doesn't mean I don't try to build great relationships with everybody. I do, because, you know, the folks are actually really, really nice in the industry overall. But, you know, it takes time and it gives people a chance to work with somebody who's Asian and who's female, which most of them probably never have in this industry. So, you know, again, it's part of being the first and being the only, right? And as many of us on this call know, many of us have been the first and the only, and sometimes you just have to blaze the trail. You know, so that's the industry. On the dealer side, it's dealers. And so, you know, all I have to say is, you know, we work for an amazing company in Cox. So last summer, I was actually on vacation and, you know, I was trying very hard not to turn on my phone and not to, you know, answer emails, but I got a text from one of my team members, Patrick Brennan. And he was like, hey, do you have a second? Can you call me? And I knew, like, if I get a text while I'm on vacation, and everyone knew I was on vacation, that it can't be good. So I call him and he's like talking about the weather and how things were going in Atlanta. And I was like, okay, he's beating around the bush. Something happened and he's beating around the bush. And so finally I made him spit it out. I was like, so what's going on exactly? I'm like, I'm pretty sure he didn't call to tell me about the weather in Atlanta because I'm in North Carolina. So I know the weather's probably about the same. And he finally told me, so the night before, a bunch of dealers had gotten onto Facebook. There's this Facebook group where they all gripe and so forth. And they did not like the fact that I had made a rule that we were not going to open up our locations yet, even though all the states, this is post the first shutdown. So all the states pretty much at that point had some things reopening, more obviously in the South, fewer in the North, but things are starting to open up, and this was in June. And so the dealers didn't like that I had just sent out and said, nope, Mannheim's staying closed. We're still doing business online. Sorry, you can't come into our offices. You can't come into our lots yet. And so the dealers piled on, and apparently there was a lot of racist and sexist comments made. I was told not to go look at it, so I didn't. But I appreciate it so much that, you know, when Patrick told me this, he said, and we got it taken care of. and he was all fired up about the whole thing. And, you know, it was interesting because I was probably less fired up than he was about the whole thing. He probably had never really experienced it, you know, that kind of racism, sexism, and so forth in his lifetime around, you know, he's probably never just experienced it for somebody he knew or cared about. And unfortunately, most of us probably who are not an insider, right, have experienced some sort of racist, some sort of sexist comment. And, you know, again, I was like, Patrick, thank you very much. Thank you for having my back. Thank you for, you know, the nice thing about being president of Mannheim is that you get to kick them out of coming ever again to Mannheim auctions, which we did. That's the beauty of being in charge, which they forgot. But thank you very much for having my back. But it made me reflect. It's like, I realized, you know, if we don't continue to focus on doing what we need to do, if we get distracted by the racism and hatred out there, we'll never get to where we want to go. I would have given up in kindergarten, like most of us, because I mean, we've all been taunted since the day we walked into school. And so, you know, I just encourage everyone to continue to focus on why you're at work every day, what you're trying to achieve, and everything else is noise. You just gotta have to keep going, and don't let it derail you from where you want to go. And that ultimately is how we're going to break barriers. We're going to have to continue to keep marching forward. And the beauty today versus growing up is we get to march forward together. And that's what Lotus is all about. It's about marching forward together. So thank you, Larry.
Great, Grace, thank you so much. I had several takeaways. I had many takeaways, but I'll just kind of boil it down to 3. You talked about, you know, just because you're respected because you hold a position doesn't mean you're always included.
That's
So,
right.
you know, we always assume, oh, just because you have the respect, you have the position, you're included. So thank you so much for that. You talked about the model minority, right? For those of you who don't know what that is, so I'll be happy to talk to you a little bit more. It is a double-edged sword, right? Being the model minority, that stigma that Asians have. And I've seen that play out many times over. And then the third one is, you said, stay focused on the things that are important. Everything else is just noise. And thank you for sharing how you stuck to your guns when you were pressured to open up the business when everybody else is doing it, but we continue to stay true to our compass. So thank you so much for that. Great advice, great insight. So I'm going to transition to my last question, which I'm going to ask all of you. But let me provide you a little bit of context with regards to the last question. You know, with all the anti-Asian hate in the news, I want to spend a moment talking about how that may be impacting our employees. Now, I was recently asked by a non-Asian colleague of mine as to why is there a sudden rise in this anti-Asian incidents? And the sad fact, and I told my colleague, that all of this mistreatment, this harassment, this microaggression towards Asian American is nothing new. Has always been there. Unfortunately, it's to some degree, our Asian culture, our upbringing that has taught us to look the other way, not to stir the pot, cause trouble, or draw attention to ourselves. This is why so many incidents go unreported. Recently, actor Daniel Day Kim spoke to the U.S. Congress about the anti-Asian sentiment I just talked about. In his testimony, he mentioned that a pollster once told him that Asian Americans are not reported as a group in the demographic data because they were considered, quote unquote, statistically insignificant. So here's the question for all of you on the panel, and starting with our guest, Riju. Do you think that the sentiment that Asians are not statistically significant is also reflected in corporate America? Riju, I think you're on mute there. There
Yes,
you go.
trying to unmute. I'm going to answer this question a little bit differently. And here's my answer to the question. As I reflect back on years of work life and years of education, the value of diverse thought processes, the value of people coming from different walks of life to solve the most difficult problems is today probably most visible in the world. When I look back at how the people from different walks of life came together to solve for the pandemic and how we sped to getting the vaccine out, if different voices were not equitably heard on the table, you would never come up with a breakthrough solution. If the world didn't join hands to solve this problem, we won't be sitting where we are sitting right now, with at least 50% or 46% of Americans with a single jab done, the world actually racing to get there. So for me, the hope and the belief of diversity of thought, diversity of race, various types of people coming together to solve problems. I mean, there could not be a better example. And I love corporations who have taken it on themselves to bring people together. I see that happening at Cox, I see that happening at Genpact. And what it does is it helps all of us look beyond our differences and look at the larger cause that brings us to work, that just basically brings us to existence in this world. So therefore, I look at the current situation as probably the best opportunity has unfolded versus what we ever saw in our lifetime, coming out of probably the most unfortunate event that happened to all of us, which is the pandemic, which probably in 100 years nobody had seen.
Thank you, Riju. Yeah, I mean, the pandemic is a great example of how we have to come together to solve a real live world problem. Great example. Who wants to go next? If I need to, I'll be happy to repeat the question. Anyone wants to?
I'm happy to add a few thoughts, Larry. I love what you said, Riju, and I think you're spot on about what the magic is of inclusion and when it actually happens effectively. I have to say that the sentiment around statistically insignificant or the experience of Asian Americans not being understood, I think is reality in society, and I think it's reality in corporate America. I think that's the place we're in today. Thankfully, awareness is growing, so I have hope for a better tomorrow. But I think that is where we are today, and I think that those who do not sort of look to understand and look to appreciate, Asian Americans are the largest minority ethnicity group, the largest growing, the group experiencing the largest amount of growth in the United States. And it has been for the decade past, and it likely will continue to be as we move forward. So it's a growing part of our American fabric. And you mentioned at the top that it's incredibly heterogeneous. The cultures that we represent, the number of countries that you mentioned, the amount of the world's population that we represent. So that part of the challenge is it's not simple to call it an Asian experience. It's incredibly heterogeneous, and so there are dimensions of it that it's hard to abstract into specifics. But I will tell you that this notion of being an outsider, this notion of not feeling welcome in an America that is ours, is a common experience. And actually, probably over the last, I would say my experience of this started after 9/11, with rise of Islamophobia and sort of hate crimes against South Asian and Middle Eastern Americans started to rise, and many of Muslim faith, and again, it's not new. It comes from when The first of our folk came to these shores to start building railroads, you know, a century and a half ago. So it's endemic to who we are as an American community, and to sort of maybe assume that corporate America is somehow an oasis in that reality is probably not realistic. But what I think Riju said is so important is that, you know what, corporations are starting to put their own value statements on that. Like how Pat started this, like we value inclusion, we value equity, and that is always going to be true of Cox. Like that is, I think that makes it possible for us to have some level of change and improvement. And I think just even in the dialogues that Lotus has set up over the last couple of months, and I cannot thank the team enough for what they've done there, just the awareness building of what it is for, you know, folks like us to have grown up to be living, working in communities where this exists. I think, you know, we're starting a new dialogue that feels very new and creating new outcomes for us. And so these are the things that make me excited and hopeful for the future, but not without a sense of a reality of where we are.
Thank you so much, Sujata. Grace, I'd like you to go ahead and take us home.
Yeah, well, I have to agree with Sujata. I mean, it does feel like people find the Asian population, you know, as a demographic group kind of insignificant. I think partly is the minority. Oh, they're the group that seemingly has it all together, so they don't have any problems. Like they're doing better than the majority. So why am I worried about them? It's a non-issue, right? So I think there's a bit of that in the corporate sentiment, but when you really look at the numbers, we're underrepresented even at Cox at the very, very senior levels. And I actually appreciate the work Cox has done to not just look at people of color as a totality, but people of color by different ethnic groups. And when you see the breakdown, actually Asians are probably most underrepresented at the VP and above level versus anybody else. And that's one of the first things, is having that awareness. And again, I agree with Sujat. Lotus has been amazing. It really started at the right time, even though it was hard during the pandemic. It's great that we're getting together. We have a voice. And that's the one thing that's so different than growing up. It's, you know, all of our parents, I'm sure to some degree, is like, you know, put your head down, work hard, get straight A's and you'll be fine, right? But that's not true. It's not true. But you know, and we now have the wherewithal to do it. We didn't grow up in Asian countries, right? We grew up in the US. We are Asian American. And the American side of me is like, I'm not staying quiet. You kidding me? What do that? That's very un-American. And so I appreciate how much that, you know, talking to other leaders within the industry. I just had a conversation with one of my clients. Unfortunately, I can't even tell you where this client's coming from because you could probably figure out who this person is because there's so few of us. But he was really struggling with trying to get heard among his company, which is a very large commercial client. So, you know, and we were just sharing ideas and he's like, I'm making so much noise, you know, because when the executives think about diversity, they only think Black, they don't really think about other races. And he's like, I don't know how to navigate all that. But he was just so grateful that he had somebody else to call. And I was so grateful to him. I was like, thank you for speaking up. Thank you for being an advocate at your company, which employs hundreds of thousands of people across the US. You know, you're making a difference. And so we just got to continue to encourage one another to speak up, to band together, to hold hands, even if it's outside of Cox or outside of our own companies, because it's only when we all collectively have a voice that will be seen as having a collective voice. So, you know, again, thank you, Larry, for hosting today. I mean, it's really fantastic to be on this panel and seeing hundreds and hundreds of people here today, because this is the beginning.
No, thank you, Grace, and thank you, Sujata and Riju, for your great insight. and really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. I think now we still have a few minutes. Part of my job is to make sure we stay on track, right? So, and we are on track and we are on time. So I think we would love to take some live questions from our audience, some Q&As from our questions. So I think I have a colleague with me, Connie. There's been so many comments, so many questions. We're not going to be able to get to all of them. But I think, Connie, are you there?
Yep, we have
Okay.
a lot of great questions.
Go ahead and
So
fire them off.
I will start off with the first question. I think Chris Ellington asked, as a Caucasian male, what advice would you give to someone like myself to educate myself and others to the current situation and champion the inclusion of people of color? And I think that is to all panelists and to you, Larry, as well.
Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead. It's free forming. Anybody could answer, so feel free to just go ahead and jump in.
I'll just say, Chris, thank you for showing up today. That's the beginning of learning and understanding. So I'm sure anyone on this panel or anyone here today would love to hear from you, and find someone you know of Asian American descent or Asian American, and have a conversation. That's where it all begins. So thank you for being here.
Totally agree. I also think reaching out is awesome. Great plan. I also think that because of the beauty of social media, I think a lot of Asian advocacy groups and also many Asian Americans have been brave enough to share their experiences and also statistics about, the makeup of our communities and the kind of experiences that we have had throughout our lives and so on. And I think you can, I think, easily find some really great content to sort of understand the experience of others also through social media.
The only add I would do is that, and at the beginning of the session, we did talk about the number of countries that constitute Asia. They're the diverse cultures that come together. For me personally, the biggest learning has been the beauty of each culture and being open to reading about it and experiencing it. Because when you see people, you see mannerisms that they have adopted. Some of them look okay and some of them don't look okay to anybody. And you kind of build biases basis what you see. But when you go back and read and you find out about, how they grew up, what makes that culture, it helps you understand the pluses, the minuses, the history, etc. And I've always been fascinated. And for someone who's lived in India so long, I did not have enough appreciation for the Vietnamese culture, for the Korean culture. And I've actually gone ahead and educated myself on all of those cultures to look at, wow, what beautiful diversity and what great learning. So my only call to action will be, if you are a student of culture, history, human behavior, it's always fascinating to go back and see what makes people who they are.
Thank you. And then I'll go ahead and finish it off because I do want to answer this, respond to this question. I actually learned a very important lesson last year during the whole social injustice. And I was talking to a colleague of mine, Ed Cox, a wonderful gentleman, African-American. And when all of that stuff was going on with the George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, he shared with me something that I will always remember that I think really applies in terms of how you can help from an allyship standpoint. He said to me, Larry, I know you will stand with me, meaning that I and him will know what's right and what's wrong, and we would not engage in this kind of behavior because we share a common bond as a person of color. That's what he meant by, I know you will stand with me. You would not engage in those kind of behavior actions. But here's what I need you to do, Larry. Not only do I need you to stand with me, I need you to stand up for me. Not only stand with me, but stand up for me. And what he meant by that was, do you say something when you think there's something wrong? If you see something, are you going to intervene or are you just going to look the other way? Am I the only one who has to speak up in the room? Right? So that's what he means by standing up. So I would ask all of you how you can help. We've already talked about how our Asian culture, we tend to not necessarily speak up as often as we should, because that's what we're taught. How you can help is, will you stand with us and stand up for us? Those are the two things that I would suggest. Do we have time for another question?
I
Connie
think
or
so.
Tamer? Okay, good.
Yes, I
Yeah, let's
think
go. Okay.
this one will be super quick, but what have you all been doing to practice self-care during this period of multi-crisis, pandemic, civil unrest, and economic volatility? How might some of your intentional practices help others?
I take walks. I make sure to get outside to enjoy the beauty of the world, and to give me some sense of perspective, because I think we all have faced the constant roller coaster that is this last year. I leave myself time for thinking and for taking steps back, because it is a lot. It's very heavy. And then the final thing I will say, my word for 2021 is grace. It is to give grace to others and to give grace to yourself. And so if you're not doing everything that you think that you ought to be, give yourself a break. We've been through, like Riju said, something that people haven't been through in a century and then some. So give yourself grace is what I'd say.
I would add exercise and be grateful. It's amazing how you can be grateful to be alive. How you can be grateful to be with your family. And it's been a true roller coaster. A lot of us thought that this was the end of it. We are vaccinated, and you hear about everything that's happening in India, which is so unprecedented for anything that the country has faced. So I don't think this is over. And it's a real test for humanity. And whatever we can collectively do to make it easy for others. But as Sujata said, give yourself a break, do something else, watch Netflix, and cut yourself some slack.
I would say, reaching out to folks, friends, colleagues, even clients, and having a real conversation. I think everyone in the entire world has gone through something very, very traumatic in this past year. And so we all have something shared. And so I have found that has been the starting point with conversations, to go one step deeper in the conversations. And, working from home also allows for more time to have maybe fewer conversations, but definitely more in-depth conversation. So, for me, it's about reaching out and just talking to people and getting beyond just the weather.
Oh, thank you, panelists. Thank you so much for your wonderful feedback and insight. I think, unfortunately, time flies when you're having fun. I think that's all the time that we have with our distinguished guests. Riju, Sujata, Grace, thank you so much for being here today. Now I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Tamar for some closing comments.
Thank you, Larry. And everyone, on behalf of the Lotus, ERG, and NAMIC and LANTA, we wanted to thank our panelists, Sujata, Grace, and Raju for your time and for joining us today. You are just all amazing. And as you can see in the chat, just again, thank you for all of this. Of course, we can't have a fabulous panel without a fabulous moderator, right, Larry? You're so much better than Henry Golding, I promise you. So thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. And of course, Charles, this would not have happened without the partnership with NAMIC. So again, thank you so much for this opportunity. We are truly appreciative. To our attendees, thank you for joining us. The replay, it will be available on Cox One and on the NAMIC site. So we'll definitely have that for you. Here at Cox, we also have a month full of activities. So please visit, Cox Impact Cox Impact for more information. Now, 5 attendees today will be randomly selected and will receive an autographed copy of Jane's book called Breaking the Bamboo Ceiling. So, on behalf of Lotus and NAMIC, keep breaking those barriers. Once again, thank you and aloha.